Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 9 of the Reptile Rejects podcast. With this week, we got Zac Loughman from West Liberty University and Colubrid Radio. And we hope to cover a multitude of topics from managing your collection and the overall evolution of someone's collection over a period of time, and false water cobras, and running a podcast, and all the fun stuff that we'll probably get into. So, Dominic, what's been up with you for the last week?
A lot actually. Well, a lot kind of for me. I'm still finalizing my big export for my animals going to Japan. The deposit has been paid. The planes are partially booked because every single time it's a gigantic pain in the butt to try to make the front clerk understand that I'm trying to export animals that aren't pets, so I don't need to be an ITAT registrant and all that kind of crap. But it's been fun. But I'm planning on shipping next Saturday. So next weekend, if I'm happy, it's because a lot of animals left my house and it went really well. If not, I will not be happy. Except for that, life is good. Animals are good. Everything's growing up. I guess a couple of things I should say is kind of like last week, the Canadian Pet Expo, which is the Canadian Reptile Breeders Expo. It's four shows. There's the aquatic show, there's the pet, dog, and cat show, and the plant show. But really, the one we care about is the Canadian Reptile Breeders Expo. The biggest show in Canada is happening September 3rd and 14th. Sorry, September 13th and 14th. And for anybody who's interested, if you want some tickets, we got a couple to give away. Just comment on anything, whether it be on Spotify, on Instagram, on YouTube. We'll pick a few random people and give out either single tickets or a pair of tickets. We just got a couple, but if you want them, just let us know and we'll pick a few people at random. Except for that, I still have a few animals. If anybody's interested, check out my website. And that's kind of the only thing really new with me. Anything new with you, Michael?
Well, I got a bit new going on, as I had the big Western Canadian Reptile Breeders Expo last weekend, which was a lot of fun. You got to hang out with some buddies and meet a bunch of new people, which is always great. I got to bring home a few animals, like a pair of Angolan pythons, which are honestly they're pretty cool because they're definitely not like a ball python. They definitely have a bit more. They're definitely a lot more bitey than than a ball python, that's for sure. And then I also got a male Bahama boa from Cody Joe, so I was really happy to get that special animal, as there isn't too many around. And then while I was away, my Kentucky Pine clutch hatched out, so ended up having 8 of the 9 babies hatch out, which is great. And they all look super healthy. And honestly, all the tails look great, which is sometimes an issue with the Kentucky Pines. So I'm glad to see they all have nice, proper tails. So that's always a good one. And the ones that have shed out have got some pretty nice color going on too. Nice yellows and even a bit of orangey red coming through. So yeah, I can't wait to get them. Well, actually, 2 of them already ate. So they shed out and ate frozen thawed fuzzy mice like immediately. So that's always great to not have to hassle with that. When the sub-aught clutch hatches out, that's when I'm gonna be probably looking for some live pinky mice to get those guys going. But yeah, if anybody wanted to reach out, and that's in Canada, that'd want some, I'd probably have a couple to sell maybe. But if not, there's a couple of good known Canadian sellers that'll have them for that will get them from me. So if you don't jump on them now, they'll probably be around later. Alrighty. So Zac, how have things been with you lately? Anything new this week in your collection?
Oh, my collection. At the university, we had I think 30 to 40 corns born for a project that we're working on. Um, I think we had some more Florida Kings born. Here in the room I'm in currently, I have Nerodia, two of the subspecies of um, salt marsh snakes, and I was messing around in the one tank and the little twigs started moving and I was like, what the hell? And then I realized that the female in there apparently was old enough to have a litter of babies, and she did. So that's kind of fun. That was totally unexpected. So I have 8 Nerodia Clarkii babies that I was not expecting to have. So, and that happened yesterday. So there's always something going on.
Oh
And
yeah.
then
Which
go
which
for it.
locality was that one?
These are the. I'm trying to think. Hold on. Chris Montross is going to kill me. Um, Golf salt marsh snakes. There you go.
Oh,
So
okay.
the brown ones with the lines. I think it's
Oh, nice.
Pinata or something like that. So not the bright red ones. Those are the ones that are literally right next to me. But and then tomorrow's the first day of the school year. So I had a wonderful week of meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, which meant that there was quite a bit of morph market cruising on my phone. So, and you know, making plans for the rest of the semester with the collection and with my research and just kind of all that. So, yeah, it was an absolutely insane week, to be honest with you. But I purposely agreed to do this because I knew that after this weekend, Lord knows what the hell if I would have had time or not. So it worked perfectly, guys. So
Awesome.
this is the
We're
call
definitely
before the
glad to
show.
have you on.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be on, and I want to tell y'all you're doing a great job. I've listened to all of them,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
and I really like the format. Like it's just it's a really you guys are just spot on. So good job.
Well, we appreciate that. That's doesn't feel like we're doing too much, but yeah, that's awesome to hear.
We're winging it,
Uh,
but we're trying it. You know what I mean?
We're winning
yeah,
well. That's what I tell my students. So
awesome.
anyway,
Actually, before we jump into other things, I'd love to like I've listened to Colubrid and Colubroid Radio for since you guys started. Great show, and I don't keep one Colubrid or one Colubroid, just so we're clear.
oh,
Still
cool.
enjoy it though. I like listening to everything, but I do enjoy it. But I'd love to know. Can you maybe tell everybody your academic background and a bit about yourself? You don't have to go too much into details because I know your story's out there, but maybe just a quick couple little things because I think I'm going to have a lot more questions regarding probably the aspect of physiology of animals and things like that. And I think Mike might go more into colubrids, but I'd love to know your background first, if you don't mind sharing with
Sure.
us.
So teaching is the family business. That's what I tell everyone. My father and my stepmother are high school teachers. My mom was a high school teacher. Then she became a principal. And then when you grow up in a family of teachers, you have a bunch of aunts and uncles that are not your real aunts and uncles, but they're your parents' teacher friends. And so, like, literally, just teachers have always been around me. So this comes very naturally to me because this is literally all I know. Like, I'm from West Virginia, and in West Virginia, we're known for coal mines and coal miners, and like coal mining is in a family and it's a generational. So I always tell people like I know that vibe. It's just with teaching. So that being said, I always love to let people know that I was an okay student. A lot of people have this perception of me as being some kind of like genius, and that is about as far away from the truth as you can get. Um, I've always been really good at animals, natural history. I was the kid that could like rattle off all the dinosaurs, and then whatever animal I was into, I would learn all the names, learn how to ID them. Like that. That's a strength. But math, I can't do math. Can't freaking nope. When I took the graduate records examination, it's called the GRE to get into grad school. My wife is the genius of the family. She had a 4.0 in college, didn't get less than an A on any assignment in college. I don't know anybody else that did that. Um, so like universities are beating down her door to get her, and then she's got to drag my dumb ass along, and we're showing um, those universities my GRE score, and they would be like, yeah, well, can we get you without him? So uh, but I inevitably did get into grad school. I did my undergrad at West Lib, which is where I teach now. got in biology, had an awesome advisor that was a snake guy. So snakes kind of always been present. Um, my wife and I went to Marshall University, and at Marshall, there's two universities in West Virginia. There's West Virginia University, WVU, the Mountaineers. Everybody knows that university. And then the second university, Marshall, that's where back in the early 2000s, late 90s, if you wanted to study animals that were not shot with a bullet or caught with a fishing hook, we call them hook and bullet taxa, you went to Marshall. And so obviously being the herp guy that I was, I went and studied under a guy named Dr. Tom Polly, who was freaking awesome. And basically when I was getting my master's degree, that's when I hit my academic stride, because now I'm in grad school. I don't have to really do math the same way I was doing it before. And my classes are all animal centric. And I'm being told by my professors, like, what are you doing sitting in this chair? It's raining. Shouldn't you be out looking for salamanders right now? I was like, is this real? Like, are my teachers literally telling me to like get out of here and go find, these animals that they needed me to find? And so when I got to grad school, things were great. But when I was in grad school for herpetology, it was in the early 2000s. So it was 2000. I started in the fall of 2003 and I graduated in the fall of 05. So that window, that's when Steve Irwin was on TV, Corwin was on TV, Mark O'Shea was on TV. They were all on Animal Planet. Brady Barr was on National Geographic. And it was the only time up until that moment where being a herpetologist was trendy. It wasn't just like there were herpetologists, but it was suddenly something a lot of people wanted to do. And so the job market was completely saturated. And my advisor gave me probably the most prophetic advice I've been given, which was, he said to me, we were driving home from my thesis site in Southern West Virginia on some back road. And Polly was like, I've been watching you and you think it's snakes, but in reality, you like everything. Like anything that's creepy crawly, you just nerd out on. And I watch you do it all the time. So pick an animal group nobody studies and be the guy. And you won't have to worry about funding and you won't have to worry about getting grants because, big fish, small pond. And I could have said to him, like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm a snake guy. I'm going to do this. But I actually took his advice. And that's where the crayfish came into play. And I did a hard, 90 to start studying crayfish, crawdads, craw crabs, mud bugs, whatever you want to call them. And that made a massive difference in my professional life because I threw everything I had at it and it was true. There's hardly anybody that studies them. And in reality, they impact fisheries. So we have a fish down here called smallmouth bass. And if you don't have crawdads, you don't have bass, you don't have bass, you don't have tourism, your economy starts to crash. So I, went into the crawdads and I was doing crawdads hardcore when I came out of my master's, still did a herpetology master's degree, got my job at West Liberty. And then rather infamously, I said when they hired me, I don't have to get a PhD, right? And my boss was like, yeah, no, you don't have to worry about it. You got your master's degree. You'll be a teaching person. We'll let you do research. It's fine. And then 2 months later, that same guy walked down the hallway, poked his head in my office and was like, hey, we're becoming a university. We were West Liberty State College then. And if you don't get a PhD, you're going to be fired in 2 years. So get accepted to a program and figure out what you're going to do. And I'm like, what the hell? So I was like, so I got to get this degree. My wife was pregnant. And I basically ended up, my wife had our child, Colin. That was literally 17 years ago. And then I started my doc program and I did my PhD on crayfish. And that's how I became Dr. Loughman. But the students love talking to me because I'm one of the few people that getting a PhD is brutal. I don't know if it's not, a lot of the brutality is not really necessary. It's just kind of around. And so got the PhD anyway. And I was doing crayfish until 2016. And then that's when the zoo sci major showed up, hence the shirt. That was my gateway drug back into herpetology hardcore. And I cannot believe it's 10 years next year, but it's been throttled down. And each year it gets more and more and more intense. And this was the year where I was like, okay, I have I'm teaching 2 herpetology courses. We've got a collection that has 400 reptiles in it. I've got 100 plus reptile collection at my house. I'm going herping all the time. I've got graduate students studying snakes. I wrote a book. Maybe I'm a herpetologist. I was like, I don't really know if I'm a herpetologist. And so I was like, you're not a herpetologist unless you have a lab. And so now I have a herpetology lab and I have a crayfish lab and all that. So yeah, it's been a very wild ride. That's all I got to say. And
You have a turtle lab now too, or is that
the
just
turtle lab's part of the herpetology lab.
Oh, okay. Wasn't sure if that was like another compartment in there.
No, turtles and snakes are the 2 herp groups that we're studying in my lab. So
Awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's super neat.
I
I really love that
go for it.
with the with sorry.
I was gonna say
with
go
your
for it.
Yeah, with the Iowa project. I think I remember listening to that Mike Pingleton podcast with those 3 guys.
Yep.
And then as soon as you said that, as soon as you talked about it on your podcast, I like realized it was like the same thing. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool because like those guys sounded really cool. Just like they're just out there
awesome.
they're basically volunteering almost to be out there. And now that you get to send them some more help, it sounds awesome.
I work with PhDs. I work with agency biologists. I work with state biologists. I work with professors. And I tell everybody, and no offense to any of my collaborators that hear this, but Don, Jim, and Dr. Josh out in Iowa are like my favorite people on God's green earth to work with. It's just like working with herpers. You know what I mean? I mean, they are herpers. So they just, Josh has the credentials, and then Don and Jim are really good at finding things and very good at doing kind of land management. So, no, that project, we rolled it out this spring and summer, and I was kind of butt puckered, to be honest with you. I was like, how the hell is this going to work? I'm going to have my students 11 hours away from me in the middle of the Midwest, where I've not done anything in the Midwest. I always go south. So for the crayfish, and they came, actually, the students came back yesterday from April. We've been out there the entire time. And,
oh, wow.
Absolutely wonderful. There was no drama. We just had a great time. We already made a bunch of really cool little discoveries on hognose snakes, which is cool. So yeah, no, it's absolutely wonderful.
What do you think their coolest find so far was?
Um,
Did they have any like weird finds that you weren't even expecting? Like just
we
species
had
wise,
some finds
or behavior or something else.
We brought in knowledge. So I was out there for one of them. So my grad student Alyssa and Dawn, they were pulling a hog out of a trap. We have drift fences set up, and so we got the hognose snake, and hognose snakes are, if they've got a large food bolus, they'll regurgitate very quickly. And this was a little hognose snake. It was only about that big, like 6-7 inches long. And I was working up another hognose snake, and I heard like Alyssa and Dawn going like, "Oh God, gross, man!" And this snake had puked on Alyssa's side because they were sexing it with probes, and she had it like up here like this, working it, and it had like just puked all over her. And I looked around and laughed, because we were all, ha ha ha, you got the puke on you kind of thing. And then I heard somebody, like, I don't remember if it was Dawn or Alyssa, they were like, "Are those eggshells?" And then I like snapped into science mode and ran over, and here the hog had actually raided a bird nest, and we think it was a grasshopper sparrow. And I'm writing the hognose book, so I've read like every freaking thing that exists on Nassicus I can get my hands on, and I have this spreadsheet where I'm keeping records of everything they've eaten. And there was only one record that I knew of up to that moment where somebody had just said bird. Like, they didn't say what part of the bird, what kind of bird, whether it was the egg of the bird. There's just a record from like the early 1900s that says bird. And so the fact that we got them eating a bird egg, and obviously for herpetoculture, that has, that could be impactful, because the little finches that are out and about, that we like, zebra finches, the eggs are exactly the same size. The other thing that was really cool is my other graduate student, Tyler. He's actually doing his master's degree on the diet of the hogs there. And we kept finding little hognose snakes in minnow traps, and then there'd be a race runner in a little lizard in there. And they started to leave the hogs alone and then come back like an hour later, and there's a big lump in the hognose snake, and there's not a lizard anymore. And so, so I said to Tyler, we all carry these in our pockets now, cell phones. So I basically was like, put your cell phone over top of it and put your time lapse on, and let's see if we can actually get like the whole process of them catching the lizard and eating the lizard. And sure enough, he got it for a handful of them. And what's absolutely crazy is that the hogs, you can see them like they just sit in the middle of the trap and they wait for the lizard to get near their head, and they'll lash out laterally, grab it, and you'll see them like chewing, like working their Duvernoy's gland secretions in. And the lizards fight, but they slow down, but they're not like dead. They're just groggy. And the damn little hognose snakes eat them like a taco. They fold them up like a taco. So they don't eat them from the head first. They grab them mid-body, and then they start swallowing, and the lizard just like folds up and goes down. And I didn't know that they did that. And what was really funny is I was talking to one of my soon-to-be grad students who has a crap load of hogs, and he was telling me about him watching them eat pinkies, and he was like, I don't understand why they always grab the pinky in the middle and slurp it down. And I was like, oh my God, like we're seeing them do that with lizards. So maybe that's more of an innate behavior than we realized. So, but those are the only two that I can really talk about, because we're going to try to publish all the other stuff.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Very cool for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just by curiosity, go for it.
Yep, you go. I was gonna say with the egg stuff. I know like a lot of hognose people already feed like scrambled eggs or hard boiled eggs and stuff, or even so like that's like it kind of makes sense, because I think I've seen other places where they'll eat like reptile eggs and stuff. And you did a comment on Ashley's thing about them eating box turtle eggs and stuff. So that and being boom or bust. So that like really. Like it almost like it's not a surprise, honestly, to me. Like I've kept hognose in the past, and they definitely like when they're feeding the 5 or 6 months of the year that they're not in the ground, brumating or hibernating, they definitely seem like a boom bust feeder, especially to make that reproduction that they need to do. Yeah. And then in captivity, obviously, that makes them double clutch. But that's super neat.
Things that's really cool is if you read
Dominic?
The scientific lit on hognose. They've been documented raiding turtle nests since the 60s. And they do this at our Iowa site. Like I've seen them do it. And it makes so much sense because they've got all the equipment on their face to dig. And one of the ways that the turtles prepare the land to lay their eggs is they actually urinate on it. So there's this chemical cue that they can hone in on that literally tells them, oh, there's probably eggs here, because they smell the turtle urine. And they'll go down in, and basically they get into the egg chamber, and they don't have to worry about anything eating them because they're down in the ground. And they just gorge. Like they come up and they'll eat 6 to 10 eggs that are about a little smaller than a ping pong ball. And what we found is we always, whenever we catch one, we check its belly for boluses, and which is something in their stomach. And we found that we weren't really getting boluses until the turtles were nesting, and then damn near every adult hog for that month, you catch them and there would be something in their gut. And then the turtles, the nests basically get to a point, we think, where the chemical cue washes away. The hogs can't find the nests anymore. And after that, it's like a lizard here, a toad here. I don't actually think we have had a record this year of a Western eating a toad at our site. We've had Eastern hognose eating toads. But so this, one of my big things, if you listen to CCR, is like, I love going to the field, working with the animals I keep there, and then coming back and just looking at them and being like, all right, so how can I change things up? And I can honestly say that this year was really kind of eye-opening to me, because it is true. Captive hognose snakes are one of the dumbest snakes I work with. They do, I mean, there's one right now just sandwiched between the glass and the frame of the tank. They do that roar thing after prey. I had one die this year because mouse water dripped on cocoa chunks and it ate it. I was like, but These snakes in the wild, though, they're completely different. Like, it just reminds me of somebody that was raised with a ton of resources, and then you throw them into the real world, and they're like, I don't know how to live. And then you take somebody that doesn't have any resources but is savvy and throw them out there, and they're like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like, it's kind of amazing how different a wild hog is from a captive hog. The captive hogs aren't doing them any justice. That's all I have to say. So,
Yeah, that's super fascinating.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense after keeping them myself too.
Yeah.
Because yeah,
Never kept.
and or no, you go, Dominic.
I've never kept hog noses, but you've talked about digestion a lot. I've heard a few times people talk about snakes' digestion completely shrinking and growing and things like that. Is there any chance you could elaborate on that and maybe talk about the why they do that and the changes that these animals go through? As far as I know, is it every animal out there, or is it mainly maybe pythons or animals where the food is plentiful and then there's no more food?
It's mainly pythons,
Okay.
actually. Like, boas don't do it, but pythons do it. And this was studied by one of the biologists that kind of led the way in figuring this whole phenomena out. It's called pay before pumping, and we'll talk about the pay before pumping here in a sec. Was this guy named Dr. Secor at the University of Alabama. And basically what he discovered is, if you take he used Burmese pythons, that was his model organism. But if you took a Burm and you didn't feed it for like 2-3 months, and then you sacrificed it, you euthanized it and dissected its stomach out and looked at the cellular structure of its stomach, you would basically see that there was very little cellular complexity. We'll just leave it at that, in the wall of the stomach. And then what Secor did is he first, I don't know if it was first or second, but just to get it out there, he started studying the metabolic rate of pythons. And so you put them in this chamber. The chamber figures there's a certain amount of oxygen in the chamber. And then as the animal's in there and it's respiring, it uses up the oxygen goes down, and you can track the depletion of oxygen. And that's how you can then correlate that to metabolic rate. And what was found out is, like, when they haven't eaten, that's where the kind of classic idea of these guys having really slow metabolisms kind of comes into play, because they're barely consuming any oxygen. And what Secor and company found out is that when you feed a python, and you can do this with any python, like all of our pythons do this too, like within 12 hours of it eating that meal, and the meal has to make it into the stomach, all these physiological pathways get triggered, and suddenly the oxygen consumption of that snake goes through the roof. And it's basically been kind of allied to our consumption of oxygen when we're in a full-blown sprint. So if you think about when you're like running as fast as you can, you're breathing in a lot of oxygen because you got to bring that oxygen in to feed your cells so that your cells can then, you get the oxygen throughout your body and then burn that up and then keep it going. And so the snakes do this, but they don't, we sprint, and after 2 to 5 minutes for most normal people, you're just completely dead to the world. The pythons are like at a metabolic sprint for hours to days, which is crazy to think about. And the reason why they're bringing in all that oxygen is their stomach lining is quite literally transforming in real time. It's doubling in size. There's cells that are basically being reactivated. There's this thing in genetics, we talk about cells being upregulated. That's basically when DNA is being turned on. And when DNA is turned on, it's telling the cells to do something. So there's a lot of upregulation. And basically what ends up happening is that stomach lining goes from being a very simplistic, tissue to a fully complex vertebrate stomach lining that can produce acids and then, absorb things and send it down into the intestine. And the $1 million question is, like, why the hell would you do this? Like, what's the evolutionary advantage to it? And the evolutionary advantage to it comes in the fact that most pythons are kind of these sit, wait, ambush predators. And when you're cold-blooded, you don't want to have any excess cellular metabolism going on, because that means you have to go and eat more. Okay. And so with the pythons, they're perfect at eating large meals. We've all seen, this is for you, Dominic, the pictures of the carpets in Australia where they're eating a cat, where they've eaten a possum, and they just got this like huge lump. Uh, you know, they digest that possum slash cat. They're going to get enough nutrients to last them for 10 months. So why on earth would you want your stomach lining to be full of these highly metabolic cells that you have to feed if you can just shut them down until the next cat comes by? See what I'm saying? And so that's where this pay before pumping comes into play. Colubrids, don't do it. A lot of people thought boas were going to do it. Boas don't do it. And the fact that boas don't do it is a lot of, that's been used as some pretty strong evidence that while boas and pythons share a common ancestor, they're not as related as people think they are. They're actually somewhat disparate from each other phylogenetically. But that's a pretty
What about the
fascinating
Eryx
aspect of pythons.
complex?
What was that?
I definitely see that in most boas, especially like even the West Indian boas in my Bahamas, because they seem to always want to feed. Like they not that every snake doesn't always want to eat, but they definitely seem to want that every 2 to 3 weeks. Give them something kind of thing, just not obviously huge.
Well,
but with the Eryx, Smitty had the guy on that talked about the Indian rough scales and how like the one guy's buddy, I think over an 11-year period, they ate for like one short period of time, but then other than that, they were fasting for like 7 years and then 5 years, and then they were barely losing any weight until their metabolic rate actually started going again. Mm-hmm. I thought that are those just specific like to that species or that genus, or I'm just curious if you know anything.
To that sambo. But with pythons, one thing you can do to a python is you can burn them out. So if you feed them, you feed them on a 1 week schedule. So you've got an adult carpet and you give it a medium rat, and then you give it another medium rat, and then you give it another medium rat, like every 7 days. If you think about what's going on inside the snake, the pay before pumping thing goes, and basically their metabolism fires through the roof, probably stays elevated for 2 to 3 days to digest the rat, comes back down, and then what do? You give it another rat, and then it fires through the roof, because out of nature, they're really not doing that. And another thing that's interesting is, and a lot of things stay in here. I don't like put them out I don't want to deal with the like backlash. I don't want to deal with, but I've been really rethinking feeding snakes, period. Because you can go the opposite end, which is we oftentimes talk about like, well, I'm growing them real slow, so I'll feed them this prey item like once every 2 months or, once every 30 days. And I think if you're going to do that, it might be okay to give them the biggest prey item they can eat, and then don't feed them for 30 days. Because I had a grad student that came in that was really into Morelia, and he was talking about how I slow grow everything, and I saw what he was doing, and I think it was my colubrid sensibilities was like, what the hell? This poor carpet gets like an adult mouse once every 3 weeks. Like, what is this? And it's like a 4 foot long snake. But if you would have been given that same snake a medium rat, that might have been more reflective of what's going on in nature. Because we know snakes are capable of usually eating prey items that are a little bit bigger than we think they are capable of eating. Now, should we feed them that like all the time? No. But if it's up to me to go, one item, longer time in between, or smaller items, shorter time in between. I used to be smaller items, shorter time in between. Then I started reading a bunch, going out into nature, watching them, blah, blah. And I'm leaning now more towards large item, longer in between, which is kind of intriguing.
So if I can go back to a couple of things you said there. So I understand what you mean by pythons. Now, when it comes to boas and colubrids, two things. One, like if I take an island boa that has tons of food and then no food for 6 months, the stomach lining doesn't shrink? None of that happens. So for the 6 month period, his body is still running at high metabolism while having no food source? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. If it gets
Yeah.
If it's warm, yes. But here's the difference: colubrids, boas, pythons, all of them do this. During that like boom when the birds show up on the Caribbean island for the boas, they're just pounding birds one after another, and they're basically going to like they'll refill their metabolic needs first, and then they're not going to stop eating the birds. The birds are there. Then they're going to keep eating the birds, and what's going to happen then is they're going to start basically converting that to fat stores. We all have seen the pictures of the fat stores along the belly, and those fat stores will build. And there's probably a time of year where if you found those boas at the end of the boom when the birds hit, you'd catch one on the island and be like, damn, you're a chonker. Well, it has to be a chonker because now it's not getting another bird for 10 freaking months. And so then it just slowly metabolizes that fat down until the next year, and then the boom happens again. And this is where their regulatory behaviors are really interesting because we kind of get in our head that in the morning the sun comes up, the snakes go out and bask. And there's definitely some evidence that on these boom bust populations, things like that, that the snakes will bask to get the digestion done because we don't want that prey item to rot in our gut. But once there's nothing left in the gut, they'll just get into a tree hollow and sit there and live the most boring life on earth for the next 3 to 4 months because they basically find that kind of perfect temperature where they can metabolize slowly but not burn out, and then they can ride the wave of the fat store. And that's what colubrids do. A lot of colubrids will go into brumation, and they're big, and then they come out of brumation a little bit smaller than they were when they went in. But the whole idea here is I've got to have enough potential metabolic energy in the form of my fat stores to ride me through winter. And what's really interesting is with climate change, our winters are weird because when you get underground where these snakes are going, once you get about 3 feet underground, and sorry guys, I'm not the best at centigrade, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I think that's right around 10, maybe somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's about
That's
that.
kind of the Goldilocks zone for them. And if we have a super warm winter, which we started to have more and more of, actually what we have more and more of are these extremes. Like we'll have 3 weeks of polar vortex down here where I'm at, and then the next 3 weeks it's in the 50s, and then the next 3 weeks it's 10 degrees, 1 degree C, and then it's just fluctuating all over the place. Well, when those 50-degree weeks hit in January, a lot of times the snakes will come up and bask. That's what people don't realize. And they're burning through that energy store in like the end of February. And they're not normally doing that until April. So that ends up becoming a bit of a problem. So putting things in a little bit chunky, I'm okay with that. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we definitely get that
Lost
here with our garter snakes. They'll come out at probably like sometimes January, right? You get the 15, that random 10, like really sunny couple days, and it gets just up to 10 degrees, and then maybe a couple come out, and then but then you get some rain, so then you got the frogs start to go, the chorus frogs start to go, and the salamanders start to go, and the newts start to migrate. So that January, February seems to be like a time here where stuff kind of gets going, but then you could still get that frost or even really late snowfall, even though we don't get too much here. Obviously, where Dominic is, he'll probably get some definitely more snow up until probably March, even April, possibly.
We get too much.
Yeah, you get too much.
Yeah, thanks for answering that. Actually, I found it really interesting. So basically, the brumation, their metabolism does go down, but only because of temperature, right?
Yeah.
Not because of the stomach lining or any of that shrinking notion. It's purely so. Then when you take pythons, their brumation stage, which is more let's talk about it. It's not really brumation; it's just cooling them down. But the cooling down plus the not eating, so that would explain why they basically lose nothing in 3-4
Yeah.
months of not eating or not really doing anything.
It's the nighttime low. That's what's shutting them down. And what I think that there's a lot to be said about brumating our animals. I come from the world of colubrids primarily, and you can totally get away with getting your animals to reproduce without cooling them. But if you think about the lifespan of a snake in nature, and these things did not evolve to live in plastic boxes. They evolved to live in the forest. Okay, and while it's like easier for us not to cool them down, when you cool them down, you're triggering natural physiological pathways and things, and all those hormonal cascades are centered around two things. The If they're in a temperate environment, it's actually light. Light is the main thing, because in the wintertime it gets darker, and in the summertime it gets lighter. So controlling light and then controlling temperature, when you do those two things, basically you're going to trigger the hormones to do what they need to do. And while you can get it to like work without cooling them, I've had a lot of people when I've like pressed them on that a little bit, I'm like, well, how long did they live? And you'll hear, oh, yeah, they lived a long time, like 8-10 years. And I'm like, well, those snakes should be living 20 years. So when we do these things and we don't actually honor that, physiological pathway, we've got a problem. But it gets interesting though, because, here in North America, we have a place like Florida where you can go in January and it's 70, 80 degrees during the day, but it gets down to like 40 degrees at night. So with my Florida Kings, I guess I technically don't have to brumate them, but when I brumate them, I get better clutches. I get better fertility. I don't have issues with the snakes eating. They seem to always want to eat. Now, kings always want to eat, but believe it or not, you can get a king snake that breaks every now and then. The two that I had that broke were the two I didn't brumate. And that was when I was kind of like, okay. So I think there's an awful lot of physiology in herpetoculture. I don't know if everybody wants to understand it. And I don't think you have to understand it. I just think, if you look at all the advancements that happened in the 70s and the 80s, where we learned like the recipes, what we essentially started doing was snake physiology in our garages, and we just didn't realize it. So, that's the deal.
Yeah, I feel like now we can, like, even like you said, like using the stuff we learned in the 70s and stuff. Now we're in a time period we could use some newer technology and newer information with some of the old school ways of doing things, because not all of it's wrong, not all of it's perfect, but like, right, like you could use a glass fish tank with a screen top with a heat lamp and make a bioactive or naturalistic tank for your Clark eye or for your garter snake, or even a pine snake. Like I've people are like, oh, you got to keep a pine snake in a V70 tub. Well, some maybe because they just are slightly neurotic, but others seem to like they're fine. Like they have their bad days, but you walk in the room and they can see everything, and they just come out and kind of see what's going on. You give them food, they might get a little angry at you, but they're fine. It's more of providing the the amount of hides, the correct hides, not just, oh, I tried putting my ball python in a 4-foot cage, but it had these huge hides or had no hides, and of course it's not going to eat. Of course, like you're not doing it correctly. But yeah, I think we're in the time period where we need to mix the science and the old knowledge and the new knowledge all in one, and the natural. A bit of everything, right? Like nothing's ever one way, and you can always do stuff multiple ways. And yeah,
like,
it's just super neat to see what you're doing.
The best advancements that I have, and you just saw them, I just turned them back on. These stupid smart plugs that I bought for my house, pisses me off to no end. They won't let me use them at the university because they're convinced that North Korea is going to invade our school through my smart plugs. But the smart plugs, I was setting them up to like come on and come off, and I was, every 2-3 weeks changing them to try to mirror what was going on outside with sun up, sundown. And after like the 4th time of me doing that, I was looking on my phone. I was like, wait a minute, there's literally a sun up and a sundown option. And so I clicked on those, and it is true to me in Wheeling, West Virginia, which is crazy to me. And I get a completely natural light light dark cycle now that is literally mirroring what's going on outside. And I can flat out tell you, since the plugs, which I started using about 2 years ago, I now get a fall mating season in a lot of my colubrids. I never got that before, but like the males are just, I mean, it's just like springtime. And a lot of species do that. And it has to be like the only thing that changed was the light cycle. That was it.
I was going to say
So,
for light cycles, if you go on Amazon and you do astronomical timer, that's exactly what that is. And that's not even connected to the internet, nothing. You just put in your Eastern Standard Time or Pacific Time. You put what time it is. You put it turn on at sunset, turn off at sunrise. Sorry, the other way around, whatever. And it works amazing. My entire rooms have been on those timers for over 10 years. And I literally have
yeah,
nothing to do. The lights cycle automatically. The days shrink, the days increase. It's the easiest, perfect tool to use, and they're like
it
20
is.
bucks.
Yep. And, and I'm literally like sitting here thinking about doing it. Like, I really want to do an experiment where we just take all the bits and pieces of brumation, and like I have one group of corn snakes where they just get the light, and then I get another group of corn snakes where they just get the temps, and then I figure out a way, and I can do this in a new building I have, where they get lights and temps, and then look at the clutch sizes that come out of the breedings of those. That's like we couldn't do that when I was in college 20 years ago, and now I can buy this crap on Amazon and do a really badass scientific study. So um, it's pretty cool stuff.
I just
Oh
wonder
yeah.
if that's what you did, if you should use wild caught animals, because when you've got captive animals that have been bred and inline bred, and then they become captive, right? They become domesticated. They don't really need all those cues anymore after a certain amount of you know, third generation, fourth, fifth, sixth generation. Corn snakes were at what? We're probably at 100 generations. I don't even know,
Oh,
right?
easily.
So would they even clue into all those things? Do they even need more than one or two
Oh,
cues? Just
they will definitely cue into those things because evolutionarily, that's the response. And I know, so hognose snakes again. The guy that I'm writing the book with, the hognose book with, his name's John Rice. He's with Fathom Hogs. He's awesome. And he did a little experiment where he had one part of his colony of hogs. He didn't. He just kind of let whatever was going to happen thermally, and then did the whole light dark cycle. The other group of hogs, and these are morphs. These are not wild brown Nassicus looking things. These are sables and lemon ghosts and all that jazz. The other group, he shut them down, turned the lights off like they're underground, and he got them cold, like 50 to the upper 50 degrees Fahrenheit, upper 40s, and then he basically just looked at productivity, and the productivity was through the roof in the group of snakes that were chilled properly, and it was like okay. And he also got a lot of double clutching. Now, double clutching is that's its own conversation. But the double clutching was coming, I believe, John said, more from the animals that got cold. So I think there is something to that, because these hormone cascades that we're talking about, they you can't breed those out. A lot of people think that you can make that go away. I just think that we kind of figure out the minimum of what we can do to get this to work, and then we're like, yeah, it worked that way, so I'm just going to do that again. So if the goal is to get eggs, sure, but if the goal is to get like more eggs or to keep your snakes healthy so they last longer, it might be better to try to do the full blown system. And that's what I want to test. I might be full of crap. That might be total garbage. That's the null hypothesis to that hypothesis. But until somebody actually does it like critically, we won't really know. And so that's what makes this herpetoculture stuff to me a lot of fun. Is I can literally somehow take what is my hobby and make it my avocation and put it together. Uh, and that's not too shabby. I can't really bitch that much about that. So
Yeah, for sure. I think even there's a guy up here in Canada, Corey Woods. he, I think he drops his ball pythons down for like a week every year down to like 55 degrees slowly for just the 1 week. But then I think he did it like once accidentally, and then after that he's had like amazing seasons or something along those lines. Just with that little drop off, that extra little cue, even though they're ball pythons and they seem, and I think even boas seem to run slightly different where you can get them to go. But I feel like with anything, it's that little night drop. Like, yeah, they're from a more equatorial area, but even then you still get those odd nights where it gets a little chilly every once in a while, which helps trigger that extra step there, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
Do you think it's more the females or the males? Because dropping both, I wonder sometimes if all you need to do is drop only the male, or do you only need to drop the female? Because you're talking about your experimentation. I'd be more curious to only drop the males, don't drop the females, and then breed them, and then do the opposite and see if you have a better outcome from one or both. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So definitely with males, you got, heat kills sperm. We know that. But in the case of this seasonality, I don't know if the temperature or the light is more important for the spermatogenesis. There's actually were a ton of experiments done on this with garter snakes in the 60s and 70s, but they were not being done for herpetoculture at all. They were being done to like understand how snakes work, kind of thing. I know with the females, they definitely found that for you to get the hormones that cause ovulation for these temperate snakes, I'm talking about temperate snakes, that they thought that the light and the temperature had like you couldn't just use one to get the best result. You needed both in concert, but they were doing crazy things with light levels and everything. But I think it's both personally. Um, I mean, I've bred a couple things in this room that I wasn't intentionally cooling, and then I looked at my govies because I have data loggers everywhere I go, and found out that this room just like kind of naturally is Florida, for lack of a better word, and my Florida Kings were the ones that went. So okay, that makes sense. But yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if Mike has anything else he wants to bring up, but if not, I'd love to go back to what you talked about double clutching. I don't quite understand the phenomenon of double clutching, purely because I'm a Python guy and it doesn't happen. But I'd love to understand, why is double clutching not a thing in Pythons, and why is it in colubrid? And I've even heard of triple clutching. So why is it in one section of the snake hobby or in the species and not in others?
It's not all colubrids double clutch either, which
No.
is also interesting.
It's a lineage thing. So evolutionarily, pythons metabolically are so slow compared to a colubrid that they can't feed, allocate resources quick enough to then have another clutch go. But with colubrids, and specifically colubroids, the dipsadids, which are the group that I really like, those bastards have metabolisms that are so freaking fast, it's ridiculous. And so when they eat, they're assimilating energy and then they're on to the next meal. Like a false water cobra, they double clutch on me every year. And I was freaking out when this was happening because there's this kind of idea that double clutching's bad because you're basically burning out the girls, which makes sense biologically. Then I started, going to lit, and I found out that there was this study done with false water cobras where they basically they peeled every false water cobra that was hit on the road off this road in Argentina. And, these herpetologists dissected the girls and they looked to see the follicular development. And in nature, these things were double clutching. So it's actually a totally natural thing for them to do this. And the reason why they double clutch, I think, this is Zac Loughman's idea, has more to do with their ecology and niche in nature than anything, because the species that are double clutching live in predator saturated environments. They live in places where if you're a baby snake, your likelihood of surviving to adulthood is so low that it's essentially the exact same thing you see with sea turtles. Sea turtles go up on the beach, they lay 50 eggs, and maybe 1 out of those 50 eggs make it. The species of, well, what we don't know about sea turtles is most sea turtles will lay 3 to 5 clutches of eggs a year. They lay a clutch, they swim around out in the ocean, they come back up on the beach 2 to 3 weeks later, lay another clutch, swim around in the ocean, come back up. And that's just because evolutionarily they've evolved this mechanism where that is the rate of reproduction for the parents to be replaced by one individual, you know? And so with the snakes, the species that are doing this, there's just high predation rates. Now, pythons, do they have high predation rates? Probably. But evolutionarily, they didn't have a mechanism to respond to that, whereas colubroids did. And so with these snakes, they are able to restore their bodies to a condition where they can then ovulate. They store the sperm, and they can store the sperm for years, by the way. And then basically, if conditions are met metabolically and out in the environment, boom, they're ready to go. It's a good year. We might as well drop more eggs. Well, when we have these things in human care, they're living in perfection. So every year is a good year. So that's what drives me. Like, it's fun the first couple times that it happens. And then after that, you're like, Jesus freaking Christ. Like, my falsies, I'm very open about this. I think I produced, I'm over 100 eggs for the year. And I'm actually trying to figure out how to make them not double clutch. I have one female false water cobra. Every year she's produced clutches, it's been at least 2. I've never had anything triple, but it's really interesting. They will lay the second clutch within a week of the first clutch hatching. It happens every freaking year. And it's complete bullcrap, by the way, that the second clutch is smaller, because this is the first year that I had a female. She laid 28 eggs for the first clutch, and it was like 33 to 36 eggs. It was the largest clutch of false water cobras I've ever had. And, you know, that's just kind of what they do. And where do they live? These wetlands in South America. And just think about all the wading birds, all the caiman, all the turtles, all the things that are eating the baby falsies. So it makes complete ecological sense to me that they're willing to do this. And they're big snakes, so they can, you know, they can basically handle it. So, yeah. But
yeah, they definitely seem like a boom bust animal, kind of like hognose in that sense
yeah,
too, right?
hogs do it. I every female hog I bred this year double clutched. My Lampropeltis, Scutula, the Florida Kings do it. I've had Brooks, or not Brooks, Goinai, the Blotch Kings, or Means Eye, whatever you want to call them. They've double clutched with me. I think I've only had corn snakes do it once, but it is a relatively common phenomena. And just the colubroidea, which I've talked about before, that major group of snakes, they just evolved this mechanism, and it's a pretty good survival mechanism if you think about it. It's just, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I
I
almost
think
wonder
we
if
freak out a little bit too much about it. You know, there's this kind of, oh God, she double clutched. If she's got the resources, I don't think it's that big a deal. Now, should the snake double clutch every year of its freaking life? I don't think so, but I'm testing that theory with these damn false water cobras. I even tried reducing the food and like putting the weight back on them slowly. It didn't matter. They just boom, and they can put weight on so fast it's ridiculous because they eat everything. Like, so yeah, no.
So you brought up 2 things that I'd love to point out, and just no worries. So you brought up 2 things that I'd love to talk about. One of them is, I've heard this thing. A lot of people often say that each snake only is going to produce a certain amount of follicles, can only produce a certain amount of babies in their lifetime. I'd love to know, is that true? Is that folklore? Is that like, if you have snake A, will it only produce a certain amount of eggs? And then, sorry, go ahead. We'll do that question first. Go.
Sure. I think there's elements of truth and elements of folklore to that question. First and foremost, there's probably a species of snake in herpetoculture where that rule applies. Like, I could think of oh my God, I just forgot the name of it. The American python. Loxosemus, that's it. Loxosemus bicolor. Those things, they reach adulthood at like 10 or 11 years old, and they seem to like not have more than 6 eggs, and they reproduce like every other year. You know, they basically have evolved what we would call in biology a life history strategy to not be a large percentage of the biodiversity. So where these things live in Central America, um, they tend to live in dry, xeric habitats where prey availability may be a little bit limited, moisture's limited. So they've evolved a mechanism where I'm not going to be pumping out tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of babies. So that would be a species of snake where I could see there probably is a finite number because they've evolved that. But I have a feeling like false water cobras, if they can recoup, they're just going to keep having babies. And I know this because I inherited a pair from a guy, wonderful guy in Philadelphia, Bob Long. He has a couple really fun YouTube videos. But we got his 2 snakes, Clyde and Bonnie, I think was the other one's name. I don't know. And Shelby, that was what it was. And Shelby was like an 18-year-old false water cobra. And my student screwed up. This was also during the pandemic. And they put a male in with Shelby, and I was like, oh, don't do that. And the male bred her. Shelby produced a beautiful clutch at 18, proceeded to double clutch. So then she produced another clutch and then lived for 6 more years. You know what I mean? And that's an 18-year-old snake. The St. Louis Zoo, back 2-3 years ago, I think it was, they had the rather infamous ball python lay a clutch. We think it was a Partho clutch, but that snake was like pushing 45 to 50 years old. So if they've got the metabolic resources and they feel fine, I think these things can breed at an older age than we think they can. Should they? That's the bigger question. I don't know. But they evolved to put babies out into the world. Like that's what they do. And that's the way that they deal with things, because as much as we love snakes, they are really good at getting eaten. Like even the like most venomous snakes on earth, when they're babies, king cobras get eaten by freaking toads. Like so.
Oh, did you see that picture of the king cobra getting eaten by a corn snake?
Yeah, they got to put offspring out. So I think that they're able to do it more than we think.
Oh yeah. Did you see that picture of that king cobra getting eaten by a corn?
Oh yeah, I totally did. No, that's actually in my lecture.
That was funny. That was hilarious.
No. I think what happens is we break them. I think that we feed them an improper diet, or we feed them too much, or we don't feed them enough. We don't talk about that as much as we probably should. And what invariably ends up happening is we just aren't able to hit that secret sauce to keep them reproductively viable, into the future. But I've had some surprising clutches happen. I bred a very old king snake, male, like a 15-year-old king before, and didn't think that anything was going to happen. Got a clutch. The false water cobras never cease to amaze me. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some people up here with some old boas that they should breed that I've heard are still alive that nobody else has. And then apparently they're like, oh, we're not going to sell them. We're not going to breed them. And it's like, well, you're the only ones in the country with them still. What does it hurt even trying? Even if it's a 20-year-old animal, it still should. These boas should live 40 years old. I've kind of chatted with Steve Woodward and Jeff Murray, and they're like, well, these boas honestly should live 40 years. Mm-hmm. So like, and even if they breed every 5 years as a, yeah. So.
Yeah. Great answer. It's really interesting. I love asking these kind of questions because you've got the knowledge to be able to answer them. So you talked about retaining sperm, which is something I find really also interesting. Why is it that certain species can retain sperm for years and years, and others seem like they can't even retain it till next year, right? There seems to be a gigantic change. Like I think rattlesnakes can retain for multiple years, and with most pythons, a few can retain till next year, but usually that's about the maximum that I've seen.
Boas
So yeah, boas.
boas are even worse.
So why is
Like
that?
boas barely hold sperm for the same
And
year.
how do they hold the sperm? Because like you're talking about hot heat as something that destroys sperm. Well, that female takes the sperm. She's going to be basking whenever she eats and uses it the next year, right? So how does that work?
This is actually one of my favorite topics. So no one's ever asked me this before. When I wrote the book, I went completely off the deep end with understanding how the hell this works. So the long and short of it is, if you're a species that has, as part of your reproductive biology, you know, gregarity, so mating balls, those species will store some sperm, but they will store some sperm from multiple males. And the sperm are actually duking it out inside the female's reproductive tract. We call this sperm competition. And so when you see those like mating balls of green anacondas on Nat Geo, which we've all watched the documentary, and there's this 13, 14 foot long massive green anaconda, and there's like 12 8-foot males all around her. Some of those males are going to slip a hemipene in and basically fertilize and then get booted out. And then another male is going to fertilize and get booted out. And inside the female's reproductive tract, all that sperm is in the oviducts. That's where it goes. Or it's right at the end of the vagina where the oviducts come in. And what happens is there's sperm in there that basically they seek out other male sperm and just kill it. That's what they do. There's other sperm in there that are going for the prize, so they are juking around everybody. I mean, it's like there's a party going on inside the female. It's insane. So, anywho, but when those sperm are going to where they're going, there's two strategies. One strategy is to put some sperm in the vagina, and that sperm is going to sit there and wait for the the ovary to drop the follicles and the oocytes down in, and then it'll go and fertilize. The other place that the sperm goes is all the way up the oviduct to right at the opening of the ovary into the oviduct. And as the ova is dropping down in, it's trying to fertilize at the same time. So you've got two areas. So basically, both ends of the oviduct have sperm, and that's why you get the fertilization happening. Well, some of the sperm just basically go and they implant themselves in those same places at the end of basically the top of the vagina, right where the fallopian tubes, not fallopian, that's mammal, oviduct comes in, and then others go all the way up to, I think it's called the profundus, this structure that is up near the ovary. And what happens is they basically embed into tissue there. They absorb their tails and they become biologically inert. They're just sitting there. It's kind of like the pods you see in Alien, where people go in, they come out 60 years later. And since they're biologically inert, they can last for a very long time. And what happens is when the hormones happen that cause things to ovulate, that's what reactivates the sperm. And so the sperm is then activated, drops down in the fallopian tube, and then is able to fertilize the eggs. And so they evolve the ability to basically sit there in diapause for years. And that was the thing we wanted to know about that ball python at St. Louis Zoo was this a Partho clutch, or that snake was bred like 25 years before those eggs were laid? Like, did it literally have sperm sitting there for 25 flipping years that then fertilized the eggs? And they actually sent us the eggs. I had to fight with like 3 other universities to get those damn eggs, but we won. And then my freaking geneticist just kept doing all these tests. And I would be like, all right, what's the result? It's like, inconclusive. I was like, we can't have inconclusive. We have to know. And so we're still working on that, to get the answer to that. But anyway, and so that's what happens. And a lot of snakes have a mating strategy where we're only together in the spring. And so if you're only together in the spring, you're going to mate in the spring. Then you can leave, dissipate across the landscape, and then ovulate when males aren't anywhere near you. Because you stored sperm, that stored sperm can then fertilize your eggs. So most of the species that do double clutching or will reproduce with stored sperm, they have some kind of mating aggregation part of their life history strategy where they come together during part of the season and then they go apart. Other species of snakes, they don't really have a fixed mating season. Like a lot of the South American snakes that are up near the equator, they really kind of have a mating season that goes year long. And in that case, you find a female, you mate with her, the sperm is stored until the right season shows up, and then the right season shows up, female ovulates, you go from there. That's what false water cobras do, by the way. I breed my false water cobras in January, right at the new year. I don't get eggs until the end of April, beginning of May. And the reason why is the females don't ovulate until 2 months usually. I think they're ovulating in the beginning of March. But for some odd reason, when I breed them in the beginning of March, I don't get good clutches. When I breed them in January, I get good clutches. But you take a false water cobra male any day of the week and put it with a female, they mate. Like he tries to mate with her. But she may not lay eggs until 6-7 months later. And it's because they evolved this strategy to store the sperm until ovulation. So it's a pretty cool bit of biology when it comes to these animals. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's really neat, actually. I love the idea. That's exactly what I wanted, actually. So I had this circumstance happen with one of my animals a jungle carpet that I was trying to not breed that year because she had reproduced 4 years in a row. So I ended up not pairing her that year, and of course she still laid eggs. She laid 36 or 37 eggs, and 3 were fertile. So I decided to incubate them, and she was just a normal jungle. And one of the 3 babies that hatched was a zebra, which confirmed to me that it wasn't Partho, that it was retained sperm from the year before,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool because in carpets, there's not a lot of retained sperm for the next year. But what I find interesting is when you breed pythons, most of them, you usually need to have the females being bred only like a couple of weeks, like the week or 2 weeks before ovulation. Like if they breed a month or 2.5 months before, that's basically useless. They don't seem to retain that sperm or keep it whatsoever. It's only the locks that are the 2 weeks before that actually seem to be efficient, even though now I've confirmed that the carpets can keep them for a year. It still doesn't, it seems to be only those really recent breedings right before ovulation that seem to actually work. It's just, I don't know, just an observation that seems to be the complete opposite breeding mechanism that your water pythons or water water cobras, there you go, are doing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that has to deal with the lineages of the snakes, the resources and the environments where the snakes live, and just the reproductive strategy. So super interesting stuff. This is the stuff that I love pulling into herpetoculture because when I preach this from the mountaintop. If you understand the biology of the beast, it will make you a better keeper. So, I was freaking out about the double clutching and thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to kill these damn things. And then I read that paper and was like, oh, this is like exactly what's supposed to happen. And then, and so now it's just raining eggs. I literally, Clint's the market guy, but I am relatively certain that I helped crash the false water cobra market over the past 3 years, which is fine. I don't do this for that part of things. But there was a time where like these things were like $600 to $800, and I was just on Morph Market like yesterday. I was like, oh, so they're $275 again. Okay, cool. I was like, and it's just because a certain guy
still not a bad price for
market every year
for a high production animal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, all right, cool.
It's not the worst thing in the world.
No.
Alrighty. what I kind of wanted to hit on was your kind of collection evolution, because obviously, like you had that one king snake for the longest time since grad school, or
Mhm.
since you were going to school, and then you did the crayfish stuff, which is awesome. Like even as like a non, obviously not many people are crayfish people, but like I think that's super cool. Like
Dang.
even like I would even want to go on a crayfish trip just to learn about a burrowing crayfish and stuff like that. That
Mhm.
seems super cool to me. Um, so what? How is your collection kind of like when you got back in? What like other than the false water cobras, which is obviously was probably like a pretty quick thing you transitioned into, and you're still working with. You've gone to king snakes, and now you're kind of moving to pits. What has your collection kind of moved through,
So when I
and what
got
is it
back
now, kind of
in,
thing?
I had the dream that every herpetoculture person wanted, which is I was given other people's money to buy snakes with, which was kind of an interesting situation I found myself in because I was not supposed to be the guy in charge of the Zeus major. I've said this a million times. I found out 72 hours, like 3 days before the fall semester of 2016, that the guy that was supposed to be doing it was leaving, was going to become the zoo director down the road. And I was supposed to be the ecologist, like the field guy. And I, of course, agreed to do it. But I said to my then boss, under one condition, and that's the I build the animal collection and I fill the science building with snakes. And she still to this day says to me, like, I really didn't know what that meant. I was like, so so I was in this weird situation where initially I wasn't keeping that much at home. I was just basically filling the school. And I knew I wanted pythons, and I wanted Australasian pythons. So I actually went hard with that. I immediately got coastals. Um, when I got out of herpetoculture, which was around 2003, I had just seen my first Bredli, and within that first week of buying snakes for the school, I bought a pair of what I now know to be broken Bredli, but I went on Fauna. It wasn't Morph Market then. And there was a guy in California that was selling two 9 foot long female Bredli. And I was like, yeah, we need those. And I bought those. And they were, I mean, they are huge. I think this guy was feeding these things a large rat every other week, like doing exactly what I said you're not supposed to do. Um, so we bought those. I got a pair of olives. I got a pair of water pythons. I got the infamous Timors. So my biggest fear was I did not want a Petco collection. Like I had the crested geckos that I was doing here at the house, but I wanted to make sure I didn't want to have super hard to keep alive things. That's why pythons were kind of cool to me. But I definitely wanted it to be something where if we had a kid walking through trying to decide whether they were going to choose us or one of the other Zusai programs, and they were a snake nerd, I wanted them to be like, "Holy hell! I get to work with all of pythons. Yeah, I'm going here." So that's what we did there. But then that immediately segued to, well, I have to have snakes at home, and I didn't know what I wanted, and that was what was really interesting. Is I'd been out of it so long that I was like creeping on Facebook and just trying to figure out what community I wanted to be part of. And I did something stupid in retrospect, but I saw that like Asian rat snakes were the trendy colubrid. Like all the cool kids were keeping Asian rats. And I was like, well, I'll do that. And I got them and I liked them, but I didn't love them, if that makes sense. And so I was getting like Asian rats here, and I did this weird quest to find the Asian rat snake that I would really like. And it didn't happen till the very end of my Asian rat phase, which is when I found Japanese rat snakes, and I still have those. I don't have any other Asian rat snakes in this house, but I have 2.2 Japanese rat snakes in the garage. And so I started keeping things, and then meanwhile, I was buying the animals I thought that I would want and that would make me relevant, but then at the same time getting the animals I really wanted, which were like freaking water snakes, which nobody gives a shit about except for like me and four other people. But I really like aquatic, swamps and creeks and rivers. I'm in those all the time. So, and then that led me to the falsies. And so it's been this like meandering road, but to kind of keep this from taking hours, I just kind of inadvertently ended up back in the Americas. And so I don't know that many people who have a collection that focuses on American snakes. And when I say American, I don't mean like America. I mean North America, Central America, South America. So pretty much everything I have is, for the most part, with the exception of a few exceptions, found in the Western Hemisphere. And I have found that I like geography is making the decision for me, which is really kind of interesting. I didn't think that was going to happen. And then it's mostly the colubrid and the colubroids because I've got a little bit of ADHD and I need things that are doing things. I really, really, really wanted to like pythons. I tried so hard. I got like 4.4 poplin carpets, and I could breed those things with my hands tied behind my back, which was really weird. And then Montross was like, "Do you have poplins?" I'm like, "Yeah." Well, can I like? What if I gave you these king snakes for those pythons? Who the hell does that? Like, I was like, "Yeah, here you go. Take the pythons," and that's how I ended up getting into Florida Kings, and the rest is history. So, but for me, I know that I like snakes that are active. I like snakes that like to eat and you don't break them. I like snakes that are reactive, and I like snakes that want to rip my head off. That's the other thing. That's where Clint and I are very different. Uh, if I open a cage and something comes zinging out at my face, I'm giggling like a 10-year-old boy. And that's character to me. And I think that's part of the reason why the false waters and I get along so well. They're aquatic, they're borderline psychotic, and they will absolutely come out at your face. Not because they want to hurt you, just they've got the strongest feeding response of anything. So that kind of that's my collection. And then I also went through this lots of iterations of keeping. So when I got back in, I was like, absolutely no racks. Racks are the devil. I was one of those people. And then I started keeping snakes, and the Timor pythons, freaking Timor python. I had the biggest, baddest naturalistic vivarium for those things ever. They just didn't want it. Threw them in a damn rack at school. They thrived. And so that was kind of a light bulb moment for me. Like, maybe racks aren't bad. Maybe it's how you use the rack that makes it bad. And so now, I have plenty of racks, plenty of caging. And so I like animals that you can take and maybe start in a rack and then move them to a viv. And they almost kind of have their own keeping evolution. That to me is super, super interesting. So, but no, right now I have 5 foci. That's what I call them. I have dipsadids, so the false waters, the musaranas, and the hognose snakes. I've got the lampropeltine snakes, which are the Pitchophis, Alephae, Pantherophis, and Lampropeltis. I have my Natricines, which are my Nerodia. And then I have my boids. I'm a boa guy, so I've got boas. But then there's like blood pythons here, which makes no damn sense. And one rough-scaled python. And that damn roughy, Owen, I got it from Owen, was like, yeah, it's doing great. It's kicking my ass. And everybody that owns roughies is like, what the hell? That's like the easiest snake to keep. So I don't know. I think it's about to move into a little vivarium. It will only eat live mice. So as long as I get it live mice, it's fine. But I can't get the thing to kick over to frozen thawed, and it's driving me crazy. So yeah, no.
I've got a trio of roughies, and they're the easiest ever.
I know. It doesn't make sense. And that's the other thing that happens to me all the time as a keeper. If it's easy, I will inevitably get the broken one. That has happened more times than I can count. And then if it's like this extremely intricate, difficult thing, they just live here. Like, it doesn't make any damn sense. It's kind of frustrating. I have a baby. I got one good egg out of my Madagascar hognose snakes, and I messaged all the people that keep mad hogs, and they're like, yeah, they're kind of a bitch to get them going. And my baby mad hog has eaten everything I've thrown at it since the day it was born, but this damn rough scale won't eat anything I throw at it unless it's alive. Like, and I've used every python trick in the
How old is it?
It is a year-ish old,
Went
a
on,
little over a year.
cool it
No,
down.
it's established. It doesn't make any sense that it's not. It's broken.
Yeah.
So
Have you tried cooling it down for 3-4 months, not feeding it?
I'm about to do that because it's
Because
about to
that
hatch.
fixes everything. All with Python, all those picky feeders always switch over after that.
Yep. No, that's about to happen to it. So, but yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question because that was a lot at once. But the other thing I do is I like to try to
That's exactly what I was looking for.
well, but I also like a challenge. So the school's easy because I've got lots of room. Like I don't have any space issues at school, so I can. And I just got a whole new building that we're building, so that's not dangerous at all. But here at the house, I'm limited, and I have all the animals in this room, which is in the kind of bottom floor of my house, and then I live in a split level, so it goes garage to this floor, to the living room, to the bedrooms, and so I'm in the bottom of it, and the airflow down here is horrible, and so I need basically snakes that can live where there's always some humidity and not the best airflow, which is why the king snakes do great. But Pitchophis have always been my favorite. And I tried like hell to get those to work here, and they didn't. And then this year, I was like, no, I need pits in my life. I'm figuring this out. And I've got my kankakis in the garage, and they bred. I got close to 30 eggs out of them. And I basically went like full mad scientist with fans and airflow. Like I'm down in the basement throwing flour up in the air to see how it's moving around to make sure we actually have airflow. Like, where do I put the fans? But it totally worked. So, yeah, no. So now, now that the pits are doing great, I'm moving out some of the kings, moving the pitch over, and then I'm going to quit. Like, I am actually going to quit because I've had about 10 years of experimentation and I figured out what I like, and I'm ready to quit trying new things, if that makes sense. It's kind of exhausting. So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely well, you never know. You could try Subox again if you're getting that airflow right.
I actually thought about that. My new building that I'm building, I have an office there, and I have gobies in there, and the humidity is not getting above 20%. And I was kind of like, So, yeah, that thought's already crossed my mind.
You could do Baja rats in that.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I think we just interviewed a guy that could
Yeah,
supply you with
no,
some of those.
Well, the funny thing is that I would probably get Baja rats, which everybody has the hardest time with, and they would like breed like corn snakes for me. But corn snakes wouldn't work in that room for me. Like that's just the way things go. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Out here, I've been fine with my Subox too. So I wonder if I could do Bajas or something weird like that. That it's like, well, I don't know. I got a fan in my 10x10 room. It seems to be enough. Well, I've only had my Subox for 2.5 years now. Not everything's good. Like I got the animals that just Smitty had for a while. So like they're still going. I've had no issues with them. Other than the female seems to not like to throw good eggs too often, but the male sired a nice clutch with the Rob Nimmo Wild Rose Pass female. So
Nice.
at least there's that. At least the male's good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So with I see your so with the well actually I want to get into the king snakes before we get into those pine snake stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like what types of kings do you have? Obviously, you have the Floridas, but do you have like OBXs? What type of localities do you have, or what weird stuff that people might not know about that you got going on there?
I am oftentimes influenced by books, and part of the reason why I got into the Kings, and I'm looking to see, there it is, it's right here, is this amazing book by Hubs, Common King Snake. So I got this, and then Brian did Bad Things to My Brain, and I was like, well, shit, now I got to have all those. And this is literally why I got into King Snakes, was this book. And I hadn't really challenged myself yet as a herpetoculturalist, I was just kind of building things. So I talked with Montrose. I like the locality thing. And so I basically just started gobbling up pairs of locality kings. And I wanted to breed all the subspecies that are recognized. Not getting into what's a species, what's not a species with kings, because that's its own thing. And so I basically started buying pairs or trios of all of them. And I wanted to have locality specific animals. And what I've found by doing that is that I really like the Eastern kings and all the Western stuff. I don't know why. I can't explain it. It makes no sense, but it just doesn't do it for me. So the Western kings in my collection are the ones that are leaving. The California kings, my MBKs are gone. I am keeping my Splendida. Those are the desert king snakes because they're like the North American black-headed python. So, and they also breed like rabbits in my garage, which is pretty cool. But what I really, really like are what are called intergrade kings. So the Eastern king snake is in the Atlantic coastal plain in Piedmont of North America, and that's the chain king. It comes down, goes into Alabama before it gets murked out by the speckled king snake. Then you have the Florida king snake, which is down the middle part of the peninsula of Florida down to the Florida Keys. But that kind of northern part of Florida, from Lake Okeechobee north, you get a chain king, Florida king intergrade there, which is a really sharp looking animal. And a lot of those intergrades, it's super cool because if you keep them by locality, you can actually trace from an east-west direction the influence of Getula or Floridana based off the patterns that you see. And I thought that was really cool. That kind of played to my natural history nerd a lot. And so I just started trying to find as many different localities as possible. And I don't have all of them in my collection, but I have most of them. And so I have Hernando County Kings, which are known for not being the prettiest animals, but they're just these massive, brutish king snakes, which is pretty freaking great. I have what are called Canefield Kings from like a town called Belglade. I actually went down to Belglade on a spring break trip to find king snakes, and I didn't get a live one in Belglade, but I got a like freshly hit DOR down there, and my Canefield king snakes look identical to the one that I saw DOR. So that was kind of cool. And so I have those. I have Pasco County Kings. I actually have a clutch of Pasco County Kings that I need to start working on moving. And Pasco counties are really cool because they get this purple color to their scales. And so they're purple, brown, and yellow, which is neat. And then I have both forms of the Pinellas County king snakes. So Pinellas County have a wide-banded form, which has a strong eastern king snake influence, but they're yellow, which is super cool. And then they've got a narrow-banded form, which, to be honest, just looks like a freaking Florida king snake. I can't figure out what makes them special. And then I've got Dixie County Kings and true Brooks eye. So the Brooks king snake, which came out of Brooks's Canal in the Everglades, and they have a smaller head if you have a real Brooks eye. I worked really hard to get those, and those are what are staying. And then I also, my family has been going to the Outer Banks of North Carolina like literally since the 50s, and so OBX Kings had to be here. Like that had to happen. North Carolina is one of my favorite places. That's where I learned to herp, and so the former subspecies Sticticeps. I prior to this breeding season, I had 2.2, and they were pumping out babies like crazy, but I had a really bizarre respiratory, I think it was actually a fungus. I don't think it was a bacteria that got into my snakes. And all of my females that laid eggs got sick immediately after laying eggs, which was really weird. And I actually lost my really good OBX breeder, but I kept the first two clutches. They're a pain in the ass to get eating, but the ones that did eat stayed here. And so I'll be breeding my own, animals next year to make up for that female. But those are the king snakes that are staying. So everything else is basically being moved on. So yeah, but I love kings. The thing that's fun about king snakes is when I get home from a crazy day of dealing with humans, I do not want to sit in this room and have to like beg a snake to eat. Like, that is the last thing I want to do. And other than the babies, once you get the babies eating, I mean, these things eat everything. They come out of the tubs with their mouths open. They literally grab the tongs. Like, these tongs were wrapped by two of the kings yesterday, and I just put them on the ground and grabbed my other set of tongs, waited for them to let them go. So, but no, I really, really enjoy the king snakes. But now that I'm moving the western kings out, the Pitchophis are kind of coming in because I finally figured out how to keep them here. So,
Yeah, I've definitely looked at king snakes recently. Even me and my friend Jay were like, our buddy always has some random Cal Kings on the table, and we're like, well, those 50/50s look nice.
yes, they do.
And there was a guy that was breeding a bunch of Floridas and stuff up here, although he kind of exiled himself from the hobby. But yeah, no, the OBXs and honestly, like all that locality stuff is just super intriguing. Like, you're like, if I could
Yeah.
if I could have 200 animals, but then you're like, that's a lot of work. But
The
it's
thing that,
awesome to see that you're doing the Lord's work there with some of those
mhm.
underappreciated animals.
Yeah, I love locality keeping with North American animals because you can totally go to where the where the stock came from. Like, I think it's the Pasco County Kings. I just found out they were collected. All the parental stock were collected from this road that's near a mangrove forest in Pasco County. And I have to go to Florida in the fall, and I'm going to that road. And if I don't find the snake, it doesn't matter. It's just super cool to know I have animals that originated from, like, here. So when my family went on a family vacation to Florida, my wife is a very smart woman, and she immediately figured out, like, we're going 2 hours out of the way to get to where we're going. And it was because there was a route that was very direct, and there was a route that took me up through Hernando County, where my Hernando County Kings came from. And I was like, oh no, we're definitely going that way. Like, and so I had some intel on where they were captured, and I, been around that area, and it was kind of interesting because I thought I knew the habitat that they were coming out of, and I was wrong. It was way more forested than I realized. I thought it was more like the King Kings. So that's what, in like the new evolution of me, that's what's important to me. Is I really want to keep animals that I can kind of complete this circle where I can keep them, I can breed them, and then I can go out into nature and see where they came from. And that to me is like the full circle, and that's fun. Like, I was in Costa Rica and visiting one of my students, and they thought that they were finding coral snakes, and they were actually finding Stewart's milk snakes. And so I came in to visit Zac Kaminsky, my grad student, and he had just found the Stewart's milk snake, Stewart eye, like 48 hours before I was landing. And I was like, you do understand the millisecond I end up on the grounds of the wildlife reserve, we're going to where you saw that snake. And I didn't think we had a snowball's chance in hell of finding the snake again. And it was nuts. Like, you lose a snake in your house, you never see it again. You go to the damn jungle where there's a million places for it to be, and there it is, right on the path. Like, I mean, I walked out of the van, down the path, boom, there it was. And now, all right, well, I saw a Stewart eye. I have to have those. So now there's 3.3 in this house. Like, that's just the way that it works for me now. So, and I think that that's going to be the way I do this into the future. Like the hognose snakes, uh, I love keeping hognose snakes, but I love keeping them in a naturalistic way. And I love trying to get the parameters in their enclosure right so that I start seeing them doing what I see them do in Iowa. And well, I've been able to do that here, which is pretty freaking cool. So it just kind of, I feel like it up levels things a little bit and gives you a different set of goals to try to shoot for. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. You actually got to see pure Stewart side, not hybrids
Yeah.
with Hondurans or whatever
Mm-hmm.
else they mix into them. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, the like that makes me think of like how I'm thinking of maybe switching, like even like eventually keeping pines like with like a basking spot and hides and something like that, because like honestly, like they like when I heard was it Ron St. Pierre a few years ago talking about how he saw Florida pines on the street in front of his house because the FedEx
Mm-hmm.
guy would like accidentally run them over. It's like at 100 degrees, you're like, well, everybody says to keep your pituophis at 75 to 80
Mm-hmm.
ambient, and you hear they're out basking at 100 degrees. It's like, well, maybe we should keep them at a higher gradient and give them that
Oh yeah.
90-degree hot spot, and then give them that 70-degree cool side, and kind of see how they shift in the enclosure throughout the day. They seem to do that anyways, but it would be cool to see it like naturally, and like because I'm even keeping my one of my Bahama boas with a basking light, and he sporadically throughout the day he goes and coils underneath it, and then he moves away, then he
Drops
goes
down. Yeah.
back, and he'll be like a tree boa, but then he'll cruise around at night. Like it's cool to see the naturalistic behaviors in these animals compared to just like keeping stuff in a tub is, yeah, it's maybe cheaper, kind of. Like racks aren't necessarily cheap either, but like it's not really fulfilling until you can actually walk in your room and you see your animals out, whether they're in a hide or poking their heads out, or they're actually out moving around or coiled up on a ledge or something.
Yep. Most of the
Yeah.
king snakes are in racks right now. They're in CB70 tubs, and we have a
Yeah.
huge king snake colony at the school. Um, it's like 110 animals, and we just bought ARS racks for them. I don't. It's the standard ball python tub with a window on it, and I told like everybody that works for me, I was like, this is very self-serving because we're going to move the kings into here, and then I'm going to see if I like it, and then that's probably what I'm upgrading all my animals to over the next year. But I wanted to give it a trial run before I do it. But yeah,
Yeah, for
cool.
sure. Yeah, because like the kings, like if you give them that 3 foot or 4 foot cage, you're probably gonna not see them too much, and they're probably gonna just bury
They
themselves. So
actually
like they
do
definitely like
all kinds of nutty things in a cage. My wide banded
yeah
Pinellas I keep in 4 foot long vivs, and I brought back a lot of coral rock from Florida when I was down in the cane fields, and then I try to imitate like the grass and the herbaceous vegetation kind of like falls down over those rocks and creates this dappled situation where you'll get the kings and mine will like come out and get underneath the radiant panels and do this cryptic basking thing that's super cool, and then they'll go back under the rocks, and they kind of like your boa going up and down. The kings are doing this all day long, and then the second I open the cages, they're like freaking heat-seeking missiles, and they come like you just see mouth. My poor kid, the way that he gets an allowance is he basically does water bowls for me, and every freaking Sunday afternoon, it's just like you'll hear him like, "Whoa!" And like, yeah, he's doing the king snakes now, or he doesn't do the false waters anymore because that got a little intense. So that's just me. So anyway,
that sounds like my buddy having his kid work for him during the summer.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
with the what was I gonna say? I had a good question there. I forgot it. Dominic, do you have something? I need to remember this good
Sure,
question I was
I got
thinking
a
of.
couple. So the collection at your school is pretty big, right? You've got a good amount
Yeah,
of students too. I imagine 30 to 60. Am I kind of in there? Um,
we're actually around 100.
okay, so let's say 100. I bet you out of those 100, you've got to have at least 15 plus that keep their own reptiles at home. So now my
Yeah,
question is, how often do you get like mites coming in from people's collection, all those kind of things?
great
And I
question.
feel like, to me, like you go to a reptile show, I can't go to my snake room for that day. I need to take a shower, get rid of my clothes, everything, because I've made the mistake once. And I feel like having a gigantic collection like yours and having all these students that are big animal fans that keep tons of animals at home, how the heck do you not have an ongoing infestation all the time?
That is a great question. Um, and the truth is, initially we did. I got to experience damn near every freaking reptile, parasite, disease, whatever initially. And it was because I was attracting herp kids, and some of the herp kids came in with awesome quarantine practices, and others came in with abysmal practices. And it was probably 2 years in when we dealt with crypto the first time that I was like, okay, we have got to come up with like systems. So what happens now is the students do not actually get to work with any of the animals until they've taken a class. We created an animal keeping class, and you have to be able to pass tests on their biology. So you have to know like where the animals come from, what kind of metabolism they have, what their Latin names are, all that kind of stuff. We go over with them before they're allowed to work with the animals, the care and the procedures, and then they have to test out, or we say test out, but basically we have beginner, moderate, advanced animals, and you have to pass a test to work with the beginners. But if you don't have the moderate certification, you can't work with the moderates. And so basically what we do is the beginner animals are the animals that could like survive a freaking nuclear holocaust, like hissing cockroaches and crested geckos and corn snakes. And then we watch them. And if, the really qualified people kind of rise to the top, but the other animals are in completely different rooms that they are not allowed access to until they've passed this kind of moderate test. And so that has really, really helped. We still have bugs that'll like hide. We have the same issues that you see in zoos. And so crypto is that's one of my pet projects that I've been working with since 2018. I have this idea, which is kind of shared by a lot of other people that actually study crypto, that when you get to a certain threshold of animals, like you have X amount of animals from X amount of sources in your collection, you are inevitably going to get it. I think that it sits in a dormant state in snakes in particular far more than anybody wants to admit. And so, but then we have the wild card of rando 20-year-old who has 30 snakes in his dorm room, and one of them is regurgitating all the time coming in. So we also have created rules where, like, if you have your own snakes, that doesn't necessarily mean you get to work with our snakes, which is a little bit controversial. So we do a lot of vetting. We also tons of gloves. You work with one animal, you put on a pair of gloves. You go to the next animal, another pair of gloves. Next animal, another pair of gloves. We have graduate students. There's only 6 grad students. Our research colonies, those animals are only really worked with by the grad students, and that's actually the bulk of the animals. So like we have a hog collection that's got about somewhere between 100 and 150 hognose in it. There are only 2 people that work with that collection because that's a research colony. So our research colonies, then we just funnel down the total number of people that work with them. And pretty much they don't have pet snakes at home. So that's the other, like when I walk in, I don't know if I'm going to bring some rando thing from here. So I tell everybody like, yeah, I'm the zoo science director, but treat me like I'm a dirty 19-year-old. Like we got to make sure that I'm not bringing something in. So we're hyper vigilant. It took us a little while to figure it out, but now, I think we're kind of cooking with gas. But there's only about 50 of the 400 animals that everybody gets to work with. And those are things that are just so battle tested that, like, we have a coastal carpet that's been around for freaking ever. We've got a couple ball pythons that have been around forever. We have a bull snake that's been around forever, some corns, some spiny-tailed monitors, some leechies, things like that. Those are handled by a lot of people. But other than that, most of the other animals, we just reduce down the total number of individuals. So, and it also makes it so that with the students, they know, like, I've got to be really freaking good to get the opportunity to work with all the animals. And so it creates this nice reward type system. But I'm the only person I know of that has the problem of too many people. Like no one else has this problem in the zoo world than me. Everybody else is like, oh my God, I can't get another keeper. And I'm like, could you take like 30 of mine? So anyway, but no, that's a great question, Dominic, because it's a very interesting scenario I have found myself in. So
Yeah, because I worked in a small little reptile zoo for about 10 years when I was much younger, and they were really big on letting everybody, all the customers are paying people to touch the animals, do shows, hands on, and all that. And the majority of people that went there, no, not the majority, some had animals, and we had continuous infestations throughout the collection all the time. It was just nonstop, and it was annoying. And like, just for me, like my collection is, I like, I'm so afraid. I don't even let my friends come see my collection. Like, if you have
Mhm.
snakes, you're a no. If you're random people like my daughter's friends that have no animals, yeah, sure, I'll show them to them, right? I have zero objections there. But when it comes to like, if Michael came and wanted to see my animals, I'd be like, cool, when's the last time you've been in your house? Okay, you've been gone for 3 days. Perfect. Come on in. You've had a shower, you've changed your clothes, and it's kind of like I treat people with animals very differently because as soon as you have them, that fear comes on. What if you bring something? If you put mites, or you even like, and I'm saying mites, which is probably the easiest thing to take care of, but if you bring in Nido, if you bring in crypto, you bring in anything else in my collection, man, wreak havoc. But in your case, you have a huge collection at home. I'd be afraid coming back from work and bringing that into my
Yeah.
animals.
Well, I don't interact with our animals that much anymore. I'm kind of the director that's talking to the boots on the ground people. Whenever I do interact with the animals, most of the time I'll have somebody else hold them. Like we have a Crebo that has a tail, a yellowtail Crebo right now, whose tail got busted up. There were some sharp edges in an enclosure we didn't know were there, and so we've taken this thing to the vet, and it's been really kind of hard going. And so the keeping staff are like, could you just look at it and tell us, like, do we still need to be giving it injections of Ceftaz, which is an antibiotic we use? And so I went up and looked at it, but I didn't touch it. I put my hands in my pocket. The keeper held everything. I looked at it, and that's the reality of having collections at both places. The funniest thing is we have a monthly reptile show in Pittsburgh, which is very close to me, and we kept getting mites, and we could not figure out, like, me being the nerd that I am. I'm like, there's a pattern here, but I can't figure it out. But there's definitely a pattern here. And then we finally figured out 2 weeks after the Pittsburgh Reptile Show, we would get mites. Like the explosion. And it's because the kids were going up there and holding the flipper table animals of all the freaking animals to be holding. I was like, why are we holding the toke geckos? Like, could we just, like, please not do that? You know what I mean? Um, but anyway, and then they would come down and whether we want to admit it or not, lots of 19 and 20-year-olds don't have the best hygiene, so there's not a shower in between the reptile show and the first day of classes. And the next thing you know, boom, we got mites again. And so we kind of started rules where um, I go to the shows too. I see them when I'm at the show, like my students. Like the running joke for them is to try to, like, jump scare me while I'm in the reptile show. But anyway, but now everybody kind of knows, okay, should probably take a shower after we go to the reptile show. Probably shouldn't be interacting with the school's animals after the reptile show. So, now we're in a good spot. But we've had some scares. We When I had this, sometimes I'm the vector. This disease we're talking about with the eggs and the females laying eggs and then getting the rests, which was like the weirdest freaking thing ever. I didn't know that was happening, and I had a very intensive field schedule this summer. And I didn't, and this was the first summer I started taking my son with me when I would go. And normally Colin's here, so well, when I'm in the field, he's checking on the animals. So we had a meeting, and that Colin was going to with me, and so I basically said, "Hey, I'm going to bring these gravid females up, and I'd like y'all to check them." Well, sure enough, they lay eggs while I'm away, and then they start popping with a resp. Um, and my staff, we came up with a system where they would only work with my animals at the end of the day. They took them up to the vet. The vet basically was like, "We're going to start these things on injections," but the disease didn't pop until I took the animals to school, and we didn't put them in the collection. We have an entire house that's called the biology house, and it's basically an old house, and we put them in a room, so they were in isolation. It didn't cause anything. But in that situation, this was going backwards. Like, I'm bringing something from my stuff to there. So we just have quarantine procedures and all that kind of jazz, and we're very cognizant of it. And I have 2 keepers that are on my staff that are extremely anal retentive, much more anal retentive than me. And I'm pretty freaking anal retentive, that basically keep tabs on all the animals. So, but it is something we think about a lot, an awful lot, because we had crypto. The first time I had dealt with crypto was in 2018, and I had just gotten the snakes to where I wanted them to be after 2 years, and that wiped out like 70% of our snakes. It was horrendous. I don't ever want to deal with that again. And it was not fun to deal with all these 18 to 22-year-olds that had become emotionally attached to Boo Boo the corn snake, and now Dr. Loughman has to euthanize it, and it was not cool. So just to keep that from happening again.
Yeah, I've had a similar situation in the late 90s when I worked in the zoo, little reptile zoo. About half of every single snake died in the collection. And back then we had no idea what it was, right? And I remember they were treating every single animal with flagell, which makes no sense now when I look back on it. And they had I'd say tons of animals had died of whatever disease, which probably was either crypto or nido or something similar to that.
Yeah.
And then another big chunk of animals died from the overdosing of flagell that was given to all the animals.
Yeah.
So it was I've seen a lot of those things. So I'll go with one more questions. Maybe Mike has another one or two after. I don't want to keep you too late. I don't know how much time you've got. But if
good.
You're good. All right. Well, my last one will be another physiological question there. When it comes to dystocia, I hear people talk about egg binding all the time, and often it's hard to tell when your animal is actually. So I'd love for you to talk about what is egg binding, what is dystocia, and when should you actually treat it? Because most of the animals have a window, right? You expect this animal to lay at day 21, at day 28, day 40, whichever it is. And then why is it that a lot of them read the books, a lot of them don't, and go 20 days later? And at what point do you decide my snake actually does have egg binding? And, kind of go down that route. It's just a subject that interests me.
So we have Colubrid Fest, which is the thing, the kind of event that came out of Colubrid and Colubrid Radio. It's actually the same weekend as your big show in Canada. It's the 13th, 12th, 13th, 14th of September. And we have a day of talks. And last year, I brought on Dr. Zac Loughman, who's now the official vet of CCR. And this is what he talked about, was dystocia. And he did a beautiful talk on dystocia. So if you're interested in that, this is not a shameful plug, though it seems like it. If you go to the CCR Patreon for $2, you can see that talk. And it is worth about $200. So, because he does everything I'm about to do, and it took him like 90 minutes to do it. It's a great discussion on this. But basically, dystocia is when snakes need to lay eggs and they don't. And so the eggs end up in the fallopian tube. Fallopian tubes in snakes are these, I keep saying that. Oviducts in snakes are these remarkably thin tubes. In a mammal, it's like smooth muscle, and there's all kinds of other tissues in there. In a snake, it is essentially this semi-translucent tube. It's got a little bit of smooth muscle in there. And so there's not that much tissue complexity. And that's part of the problem. So what happens is, if the snake doesn't have a place that it feels it can lay the eggs, or doesn't have the triggers in its environment that tell it to lay eggs, those eggs will sit inside of that oviduct. And then basically the tissue of the oviduct will bind to the shell, and then you end up with this kind of bizarre scenario where the egg is kind of binded to the tissue. It doesn't mean it's stuck there forever, but it basically makes it much more difficult for it to drop down. And while I'm not a veterinarian, I know the biology. The two things that seem to trigger this the most are, number one, we actually don't have in the enclosure the environment the snake wants to lay its eggs. And this was one of the things that Dr. Whitman blew everybody's brain at Colubrid Fest, including mine. Because we have, oftentimes what we do is we will put into the enclosure our egg bin, right? And sometimes it's a semi-translucent bin full of sphagnum moss. And oftentimes, don't know so much with pythons, but with colubrids, definitely, they want dark. They want it to be as dark as can be. And they want this to undergo this thing we call thigmotaxis, which is basically they want to feel like pressure all around them, so that when they drop those eggs, they know some predator can't just slide in with all this open space and eat the eggs. So oftentimes our freaking egg bins are the problem. That's a big deal. And nobody thinks about the egg bin. I never thought about the egg bin. I gave them an egg bin. I threw a bunch of sphagnum in there, some Repti chip, called it a day. This year, I only have one snake that egg bound, and it's because of slugs. We'll talk about slugs here in a second. Every other snake, perfect clutches. I did what Dr. Whitman said. I filled my egg bins to the roof with substrate, and it was actually super cool. The snakes went in. It was really fun with bull snakes because I had this giant, hefty tub. It weighed about 20 pounds. But they went in, they coil out their egg chamber, drop their eggs, leave. And I think that's a biggie, though, is that we're just not giving them the right environment that they want. We're giving them what we think they want, but in reality, we're not giving them what they actually want. So that's one. And then the other thing is the act of laying eggs is important for these animals because they also know where I drop my eggs has to meet a certain thermal window. And so if we don't give them that thermal window, they will zoom around looking for it. They don't find it. And the next thing you know, they go a little bit past the time that the egg should bind. Then you get that whole tissue, oviductal eggshell thing, and now you got a problem. Now, pythons are different because pythons lay eggs and then they beehive them. So, so I can't really speak to the python side of things, but those are the two things I think. It's mostly environmental because when you give them what they want, they just do it. Does that make sense? Another thing is with people poking around them all the time. When I figure out that a snake's ready to lay eggs, she gets checked every other day because I don't want to interrupt that process. I had a hog the first time I bred hognose snakes. I lost a female because I was just pulling the tub too much, and I pulled when she was laying the first egg, and then she just stopped. She was like, yeah, I'm done. It just spooked her so bad. She got really bad egg binding and then died. As far as when to intervene, I'm going to go with what Dr. Whitman taught us. So if he ever watches this, he'll be proud of me. The whole thing of shoving needles in and aspirating eggs. Whitman did a very good demonstration in his presentation that basically makes it so you'll never do that again. Because he showed us kidneys in snakes are these long ribbon organs that go about a third of the way down one side of the snake, and they're offset. So one kidney's here, the next kidney's here, and if you don't understand that and you're shoving a needle in there to aspirate an egg, you could very well be popping it right through a freaking kidney, and now you're pierced a kidney, which is not something you want to do. Or you pierce an ovary, or you go too far and you go into the gut. Now you have gut biota leaking into the abdominal cavity of your snake. Basically, he explained he uses an ultrasound and watches the needle go into the egg, and he can see all the other structures. So that was a very telling part of Whitman's talk. But what a lot of people do in colubrid land don't know about python land. Can't speak to that. And it's kind of become my new policy, which is I just leave them alone. When they get egg bound, it's horrible. It really looks like something you should intervene with. There's some really horrible YouTube videos from some well-respected members of the community that I don't really have that much respect for, where they're like wrenching on these poor female snakes, getting eggs to come out and saying, yeah, this is what you should do. No. If you just basically put them in there, get them calm, get them eating again, they will eat past the eggs, or they just retain them and she's not breeding again. I had a king snake in our king snake colony who retained a slug, and she passed it like a year and a half after it got stuck. And then we gave her a year off, put her back into breeding rotation. She's given us perfect clutches ever since. The big thing that happens is slugs are more prone to dystocia than fertile eggs, because all you have to do is see a slug, and they come in all these different shapes and sizes. And so you'll get this amorphous blob of crap that basically gets stuck, literally. And that's actually a bigger deal. So one thing that I think breeders need to think about is, we oftentimes talk about, we're going to give this girl a year off. Pythons, totally works. Colubrids, once you get them going, if you say, like, we gave our king snakes a year off last year, and it was a nightmare because they didn't get the memo that we were giving them a year off, and they were all, this is in that big colony at school, and we had like 8 or 9 slug clutches, and we had eggs getting stuck in like half of them, and we had to take them to the vet, and the vet used the ultrasound and actually was working on getting them out. Our vet is very much leave it alone, she'll pass it on her own kind of deal. So yeah, no, dystocia is definitely a thing though, but Whitman definitely got through, to me at least, because I was, get that needle out, aspirated, it's got to go away. And then after watching that talk, I was like, I'm a horrible person. I should never be doing that. So anyway, and I've just kind of let nature take its course, and it's worked out well for me. So, but no, I think it's mostly environmental.
Yeah, from what I've heard from boa guys, yeah, for sure. From what I've heard from boa guys is, like, even if they do retain, like, half the time you don't even know if they've retained a baby or a, a slug or something, because after they've had 30 slugs or a bunch of babies and a couple slugs, you don't know if they even have anything left in them. And then I know Cody Joe lost his. I got the male Bahama from this pairing. The female passed away because the first thing coming out of the ova, or I don't know how, but like the babies weren't fully formed yet, so she wasn't going to give birth anytime soon. But I guess she passed away, and the first thing there when he necropsied her was a mummified baby at the beginning of that Bahama boa. And then I obviously, like, if my girl goes, she had 28 or 29 slugs. She could have a few more in her. So I'm not going to be surprised if I see some mummified slugs come out of her before she drops either more slugs or hopefully some babies. We'll see about that. But yeah, like boas are weird, where they, like, if from what Warren Booth said, it's like you kind of just want to let them be. They'll probably pass them anyways. Like, most of the time they'll just pass the mummified slugs or babies, and then they'll be fine, and you don't want to do anything, and it should be good for the most part.
Yep.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the animals are able to keep a baby that's literally rotting in them or slowly changing for a year plus, or the same way how I'll have some of my snakes, they'll lay eggs, they'll push them all out anyway, and then I'll steal her eggs from her. And then I always palpate to see if there's another lump, if she's missing one or two, because you can just gently push it out when there's one left. And then I'm like, oh crap, there's one. And then I'm playing with it, and then I take out a piece of poop, and then I haven't fed her in 5 months, right? And I'm like, how the heck is it possible for an animal to retain that for 5 months, not go septic, not have it? To me, that process, the fact that they're able to do that or to mummify a baby for a year is just incredible. Like, it's, I don't know if you can speak on that or why they do that or how they do that.
Either the colon or the oviduct. They're really good at, basically controlling. So like the oviduct has no real bacteria in it. the colon absolutely has bacteria in it, and it's evolved to deal with that. There's mucus that's kind of buffering the bacteria from getting into the gut wall. And as long as the gut wall is not perforated, there's two openings, the mouth and the anus, cloaca. And so, that's what's going on there. With the oviducts, it's more so with the live bearing snakes. It's just kind of crazy. They basically encapsulate them. So what happens is you've got the baby snake. Well, it's not quite a placenta, but it's basically a placenta for the super nerds listening to this. That will envelop and basically wrap around that baby, and that is sterile. So underneath that tissue, the baby can be doing whatever the hell is happening to it. But as long as it's got that, that tissue around it, it's contained. And so that's how they're able to do that. It's cool stuff.
Mike, you got anything else you want to hit up?
I have a couple of things.
Go for it.
First, the question I was going to ask was, how do you utilize your heat panels? Obviously, you use them with colubrids, and I use them with my Pituophis and stuff. I use them more as almost like a slightly higher ambient temp, like because my room in spring and fall is generally a little cooler because like it's not hot here, but it's not cold here. But like the room temperature for a good portion of the year is in the high 60s, I would say. I heat the room up a bit, but I set the heat panel, I set the probe to 75, maybe 78, and I know the hot spot there is going to be in the low 80s, depending on the room temperature. How do you utilize your heat panels in your colubrid or Boyd cages?
I when I bought all the enclosures in my room, I bought these super expensive heat panels, and right now none of them are on. I use heat panels mostly to maintain nighttime temperatures, because I found out with things like false water cobras do this really bizarre thing where we love them because of their crazy feeding responses, and every now and then they just will like go off food. And when they go off food, it is the most jarring, maddening thing, because of all the snakes that I keep, that's the one that feels the most broken when it's not eating. And I want it to get eating. And it wasn't until I got the Govies, which I'm a huge fan of, that I realized that when the nighttime lows drop below 68, it just shuts them down. You can hold them at like 100 degrees during the day, but if it drops to 64, 60 degrees at night, they will not eat. And so with me, my heat panels are more for things like that. So I will put the thermocoupler underneath the panel, set it to 68, have the lights, actually set it to 70, so it gets to 68. The lights are doing everything they need to in the enclosure as far as temperature is concerned. And then when the lights go out, that's where the heat panel kind of comes into play. And I actually started doing that after listening to NPR and hearing how Owen uses his heating panels. And he kept talking about how I use it more as a like maintain nighttime temps and like make sure we don't drop below something than actually make all the heat. And then I've experimented to hell and back with every freaking light bulb I could get my hands on. And I found these wonderful LED lights that and I buy them at Walmart, of all places. And they make my animal plastic cages in this room. They get up to about 84. Around noon, they hang around 84 all the way until the lights go out. And then when the lights go out, it can drop down in the summertime in here down to about 70. And once I figured that out, I just basically killed the heat panels. So no, but for me, they're used for maintaining the nighttime temps more than anything.
Awesome. That's good to know because, like I use them similar. Obviously, I use them during the day too, but like they're still set at that, like, I only want them to really hit, like for the colubrids, like the low 80s maybe. Like I have them in the Suboc 4x2x1s. Like they're set to high 70s. So like the hot spot is probably hitting low 80s, and then nighttime temp, same. Set it to 70. Maybe in the summer I set it a little higher, but the room generally stays a little warmer. Like right now it's probably 85 outside. This is a little bit of a heat wave now, but yeah. My other question was, so have you thought about maybe getting West Indian boas for either yourself or your or the school? I'm just like a West Indian boas guy, so I gotta ask. And like your
I
school or even yourself is like the perfect person to deal with an animal that's basically worthless but freaking
yes.
amazing and so
So
cool.
it's funny you say that because, like I told you, I buy the book, get infatuated, then get the animal, and I not only bought Graham Reynolds' book, Dr. Reynolds' book, but I met Dr. Reynolds at IHS last year in Knoxville, and so I was like, oh yeah, and then America's they're part of that fauna, and I was like, I'm gonna love these things, and so I bought Haitian boas. I don't remember. They're basically the brown Dominican red, boa. Uh, and they didn't. That's another one that's supposed to just exist like a corn snake, and they didn't do crap here. They just chose death. And I had them in racks. I had them in 18 by 18 exo. I had them in the vivariums. Uh, and so I moved them on to my grad student that graduated that lives in the Florida Keys. And he's like, I can literally keep those things on my back porch and they'll probably do great. And I was like, great, I'll ship them to you. And so he got my Haitian boas. But I do intend on keeping them in the future. I've talked to Rob Stone a couple times about getting Puerto Ricans when he breeds them. So I definitely want to do them. And I also really want to get in on that field work badly. So they're on my short list, but the one time I tried to do it didn't work. I also remember when I was in college, I really got into boas. I still have boas. I have boa sigma here. I can't say it. The Terra, the Mexican boas.
Terrahumara,
There you go.
Terrahumara.
Yeah, I have 2.3 of them here right now. They're actually the bulk of my boids that I have. But I distinctly remember I had Cuban boas in my hand to buy at the Columbus Reptile Show like 4 times, and they were $125, and I was like, oh my god, that's so much money. And now they're like $1,200. So, um, but that's the one that the big giant monstrous ones that eat the hutas, the rats in the swamps in Cuba.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will probably own those before I die because they're on my very short list of things I like, bucket list animals. So no,
Yeah, I
Gallivanthrus is
wish
definitely up there for me.
I
So
wish they're them and Eunectes are the only things banned in BC for boas.
mhm.
So I wish I could keep them. Yeah, like I currently just have the Strigulatus, the Bahama boas, which I think are amazing. Like I think they're way better than Dominicans. I had some Dominicans, like the one like the couple I had, they're cool, but I don't know. There's something about these Bahama boas that they're just great. They're like an inland, but like way cooler because they
Yeah,
all
no,
like every single baby, even from the same locality, they're different because they have like 30 babies. They all have different patterns, different shades of color, and there's some different localities. But then you also got like the Fordi, and then you got the different strains of Jamaicans and the Puerto Ricans, and then you even got the handful of people with Chrysogaster and
hmm
the odd guy with the Exul still, right? There's just so much cool stuff going on with that whole genus that's so underrated that I think
no,
more people need to at least just have a pair of them, see how they do. Like listen to Jeff Murray's podcast and talk to some other West Indian boa guys and just try to keep those stuff going. They may only be a $200 animal, or even like Jamaicans and Puerto Ricans. They're technically not worth anything, but they're just if everybody does their part and keeps one pair,
yeah.
they're just so cool.
My little university somehow keeps getting relationships with the University of Puerto Rico, but they're not ecology. Our molecular biologists are the ones that are doing that. And they just started this program where they're going to be going into Puerto Rico and looking at plants and then bringing them back to look at metabolites. And I was joking with the other chair. I'm the chair for the organismal people. He's the chair for the biomedical. And I was like, I know a guy who can go to the jungle and find things for you. And he was like, yeah, I thought about that. We might have to explore that. And then I immediately thought, like, well, if I'm going to Puerto Rico, I will be finding Puerto Rican boat like that. I will go to that cave. I will see those Puerto Rican boas eating the bats.
I think there's also another. Are the Virgin Island boas there too?
Yeah. And so if that ends up happening, we have to get the Puerto Ricans at the school, and we will get them through legal means, 100%.
Fresh bloodlines for zoological.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that'd be super cool. And they're so diverse too. Didn't Jeff Murray and not necessarily him, but somebody did a research paper on the genetic diversity of the captive population, and they were very genetically diverse, which is super cool for a brown snake. But it's super cool to see that the effort that Jeff and the others have put in has honestly come to a good end in terms of genetic diversity in that species and the private hobby, and I guess zoological hobby at the same time.
No, 100%.
Awesome. Dominic, do you have anything else?
I think I'm good to close it out whenever you're ready, unless you've got more questions.
No, I think I'm all right for now, although we'll definitely have to have you on again.
Oh, definitely.
This is
Zach,
a great show.
Zach, I want to tell you a gigantic thank you. Honestly, I've said this a few times to other people, but you really are a wealth of knowledge, and I love hearing the geeky side of the hobby, because that's the stuff that really gets me going too. So I really love it. Really appreciate it. If anybody wants to reach out to you or wants to go to your university, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. So to go to the school, that's why I wore the shirt. It's just West Liberty University Zoo Sci, and if you go there and find anything animal, you're going to find me. So reach out. We do undergraduate and graduate school in this. And we're more than just a zoo science program. There's this massive applied con side to the Zoo Sci major, where we're training field biologists right alongside with zoo professionals. It's pretty awesome. If you want to just get a hold of me and talk about anything and everything, Zac Loughman on Facebook, Dr. Crawdad on Instagram. Those are the two best places. And then, of course, we have Clint and I believe you're having Clint on soon. We have our podcast, Colubrid and Colubrid Radio. So by all means, check that out. And then we're doing one of the goals that Clint and I have is to basically represent the good of herpetoculture and to show people you can do conservation work through herpetoculture. And so for that, we have Colubrid and ColubridRadio.com, I believe. And if you go there, you can get access to our Conservation Corp, which is our nonprofit that we have, where we're literally funding field work to preserve snakes in the wild and then generate the next generation of conservationists through herpetoculture, which I think is a really good way to make some of our detractors look at us differently and through a different lens, that we might actually be helping. It is possible for us to help in conservation efforts and not necessarily be working against them. So there you go.
Very cool. Well, if you guys want to reach Michael Gillian, Facebook, it's just his name, Michael Gillian, myself, Dom's Reptiles on Instagram, or domsreptiles.com, or Facebook, Dominic Carbonneau, just my name. As the other things to say, again, Canadian Reptile Breeders Expo will be the 13th and 14th of September. You want some tickets? Put a comment anywhere else. For the podcast, Reptile Rejects, press that little button, thumbs up, follow, all those little fun things on YouTube, on Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or anything like that. And except for that, everybody, actually, before we say goodbye, Zach, I'll just ask you, don't log off if you can. Just wait, because we got to make sure the uploading is. So just wait once we turn it off. And to everyone else, thank you very much for listening to us on Reptile Rejects. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.